and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Two Friends Fighting. I am Robbie.
And I'm Jackson.
And today we were inspired by a conversation we had earlier today about our favorite UFC fighters. Actually, your mom told us that this would be a good topic to cover.
Yeah.
So we're going to...
we've had a couple of requests, right? So what we've noticed is that people have really been liking our MMA and UFC centered topics or content. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be actually comparing our top 5 greatest UFC fighters of all time.
Yeah, so we're going to start with our fifth pick. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll go first.
We're going to go in reverse order. We're going to start at number 5 and we're going to work our way up to number 1. We actually haven't told each other what our top 5 is yet. So
we're not sure if we picked the same people for any of the spots, or maybe my number 5 is his number 3. We're not sure.
Yeah.
I'll go first. I'll go 5. He'll go number 5. We'll kind of explain why we think we put this person there.
Yeah.
And then we'll go one by one.
Before we do, though, I just sort of like to talk about the inspiration behind why we're doing this at this particular time. I think it's particularly relevant because, coming off of Anderson Silva's supposed retirement fight last weekend.
Hopefully it's a retirement fight.
And Khabib recently winning against Justin Gaethje a little while back. I think it's particularly relevant. A lot of people are talking about who is
the number one pound for pound
who's
best.
the GOAT? Who's the best of all time?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people are having a lot of recency bias, right? Which means that you're favoring what happens most recently. So a lot of people are saying Khabib is number 1. Let's see if we think so. Let's see if we agree. And
just so we want to be clear, guys, these are our picks. It's not necessarily relevant to
it's not an objective list.
Any the rankings. You guys might have a different opinion. So honestly, at the end of this video, we would love if you guys can either agree with us or disagree with us. And if you disagree, who are your top 5? We'd love to hear it. And if you guys can back it up why you like this person,
post it in the comments too. We'd love to hear from you guys. Hear what you guys think your the top 5.
Yeah. Keep UFC in mind this list, like I said, it's the UFC fighters. So we can do a whole different topic about other combat sport athletes. Mm-hmm. Maybe we will at a different video depending how this video does. Mm-hmm. But Jackson, you ready to start?
I'm ready.
Okay,
do you want to say your number 5 first?
I'll start it off with my number 5. Actually, it's one of the old school guys. It's the Iceman Chuck Liddell is my number 5.
Ooh, Chuck Liddell. I did not have him on my list. If
you guys are unaware of who the Iceman was, Chuck Liddell, he was an old school UFC guy. As it started to get more popular and not banned in certain countries, he's one of those old school brawler guys who became the lightweight. Light heavyweight champion. Yeah. He fought guys like Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture a couple of times. Yeah. He's the guy. You've probably seen his face before. He had the mustache and the mohawk.
I think Chuck Liddell was one of the first guys that really crossed into the mainstream media, right? Because I know that still even to this day, MMA and the UFC is sort of a niche sport. It's becoming less so a niche sport.
It's still relatively new in terms of other sports, but you'll still sometimes see Chuck Liddell in commercials, right? So
everybody knew the guy with the mohawk who looked like a stereotypical cage fighter, right?
And he has that exactly. He had that stereotype. I'm pretty sure
most tattoo on the side of his head, the Chinese writing.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure most MMA cartoon commercials, the guy who's that tough guy was loosely based on Chuck Liddell with the mohawk.
Yeah.
He came in with this nasty style.
Like I mentioned in one of our past episodes, that. I actually saw him fight for the first, my very first fight was actually him before I watched Anderson Silva. It was Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture.
Mm-hmm. They had some great fights. His knockout of Tito Ortiz when he became champion, his flurry of punches, and he has that famous pose of when he wins, he screams with arms outstretched. Obviously, he's a bit chunkier now, but he was actually in an episode of Hawaii Five-0 a while ago. Oh, yeah? The main character, he didn't have any lines, but he was a fighter. He played a fighter, and the main character fought him and lost.
I think I've seen him on some cameos in some TV shows. He does not have the greatest acting ability.
No. But there was one.
You don't really expect him to have good acting ability, right?
No, you don't have to. But there was a commercial where he's promoting this car battery. He's he knees a rhino and tosses the rhino over a mountain. He goes through a bomb. It was just a really cool, marketable guy that I think in the era where MMA wasn't like a full-on sport, he was one of the first guys to really combine striking with his takedowns and his wrestling.
Yeah.
Like before him, it was specifically, I'm Muay Thai, I'm wrestling, I'm Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who like, not the first guy obviously, but he was one of those guys who like made that like mixed martial arts style popular. So that's my number 5.
Well, at the same time, like he didn't really do a whole lot of wrestling though. It was more like defensive wrestling. Have you ever seen him like shoot any takedowns? Like Chuck Liddell wasn't shooting any takedowns.
Absolutely not. But like he like on a podcast,
and he
had
throws
with Joe
some
Rogan.
kicks, but he didn't really like. He wasn't like a traditional Muay Thai guy. He wasn't.
No, his background was in like actually in like karate, like these weird old school gyms before like MMA popular gyms, like the nice ones you see now.
Yeah.
He would train out of someone's backyard in this grungy place, like old school, like Rocky style, like chasing a chicken and all that stuff. Like that's
how he was throwing a lot of like haymakers too, right? Like a lot of his strikes were just like wild, like bomb punch.
100%, like
throwing bombs.
His
right?
style probably wouldn't work now against the current guys, but
No
like.
way.
At the time, like he was one of like the most entertaining guys to watch, and
Absolutely,
he really took the sport to like. He's one of the. I would say put him as one of like the pioneers to the current generation.
Yeah, and I don't have him on my top 5 greatest of all time, and I'll tell you why. He didn't have enough title defenses. Like he got up to the top, the light heavyweight division, and the problem is that he just kept getting knocked out. Right, he got knocked out by Rampage. He got knocked out by Rashad Evans. He got knocked out by
Rich Franklin.
Yeah, Rich Franklin towards the end there. He got knocked out by remember the bald guy? Keith Jardine knocked him out.
Oh, yeah.
Keith Jardine knocked him out. I think there was even like 1 or 2 more, like in a row, like 6. I think he got knocked out like 6 times in a row.
Which is why he didn't like, that was the end of his career, which is why he didn't have the longest one. Mm-hmm. But like at the same time, he inspired a lot of people to get into it because of his like crazy style, which is why it was marketable. And again, I'm not going based on like his record, because obviously his record isn't the best, which is why he's number 5. I'm going based on what he like did for the sport.
So I think that's definitely important, right? Like we have to talk about what are the criteria of naming like the top 5 greatest of all time UFC fighters.
Oh yeah.
Right. So some people would strictly base this off your record, like who has the best record here. But then again, the record's sort of hard to evaluate, right? Because one win is not equivalent to a different win.
Absolutely. And his record is, he only had like Chuck Liddell, sorry. He had less than 20 wins. He had or at least he had like 13.
He had more than 20.
Yeah, no, sorry. He had 13 TKOs. I remember that.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe more than that, which nowadays isn't that much. Guys are fighting a lot more. I just think the reason I put him there, and the reason why I have a lot of my picks, is because yes, they had good records and they were at one point champions. Mm-hmm. But their fame transcended the UFC. Right?
Okay.
You really don't see.
So this is sort of almost like more like a Mount Rushmore for you. Is this sort of like more legendary fighters that you're picking, or is it? Are you basing your list at all around like what they actually accomplished, their record, how many championship defenses they made, or
less of that, more like obviously everyone I had was at one point a champion. They did really well in the sport, but the guys that outside, like you couldn't be like not a UFC fan, but know who this person is.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
I did not base my list. I didn't really take into consideration like the popularity. So for me, like you're gonna see in my list, I don't have guys like Conor McGregor on my list.
Oh, really?
Just
might be on mine.
Just because when we're talking about like the greatest of all time, like I think a lot of the time we're talking about like what have you actually accomplished, right? And I think that the record definitely has to speak for itself. So let me maybe tell you who my number 5 is, so you can get an idea. I have the former flyweight champion, Mighty Mouse Demetrius Johnson.
Legendary guy, did not get enough credit for what he was doing.
Didn't get enough credit, right? So Demetrius Johnson, he actually broke Anderson Silva's title defense record. I think he did. He either tied it or he broke it. But yeah, like we mentioned, a really underrated guy, right? He was just so dominant, right? And people were wondering who's going to be the next challenger for this guy. He beat everyone in the division. Right, until he ran into Henry Cejudo the second time. The first time he knocked him out with a knee to the body.
Yeah.
The second time, went to decision. It was a very close decision, and then the UFC sort of parted ways with him, so that we never got a round 3.
Yeah, he never got the credit he was due because despite winning in dominant fashion, he at one point had a guy upside and picked him up and got him an armbar on the way down, which is probably one of the best things I've seen.
Yeah.
But flyweight, for you guys who don't know, is 125, so they're smaller guys. Demetrius Johnson is 5'3".
Yeah.
Right?
The small, like, I think what it is that casual viewers, like a casual fan who just sort of they like watching the UFC to see a spectacle, right? And even to some degree, I'm that guy as well, right? I like to see entertaining things. I like to see like George Masvidal flying knee knockout Ben Askren, right? I like to see that takedown to the armbar that Demetrius Johnson did.
It's like a suplex. It's crazy.
The only issue with Demetrius Johnson is that, like we mentioned, he weighed in at 125 pounds. The guy is like 5'3". So I think a lot of people, the casual viewer, they're probably even thinking, oh, I could take that guy. He's like what? He's like 5 feet tall. I could probably beat him up.
Also, the fact that like he wasn't really like a talker. He showed up, made weight every time, and kicked ass, but he didn't.
Very respectful guy. Yeah.
There wasn't really. I guess he didn't really have that like star power to sell fights, which is too bad because I really feel like I agree. He probably is one of the greatest. He is one of the greatest of all time, which is why he didn't make my list.
He didn't make your list.
No, just why he didn't make my list because like the casual person wouldn't know who that person is. Yeah, that's fair. Unfortunately,
so different criteria, right? Make up a different list.
Yeah, we did. That's fair. In terms of if you're going specifically by record and like defenses, he'd be probably like 2 or 3 on my list, 100%.
Oh, okay. So let's maybe move on to number 4.
Yeah, we don't want to waste too much time on every single guy, but okay. So my number 4.
There's not a lot to talk about Demetrius Johnson,
unfortunately, which is why I didn't make my list. Unfortunately,
we're underrating him too.
Yeah, I mean, he honestly phenomenal guy. You see his striking, everything he does is good. Super athletic too.
Yeah, very athletic.
So my number 4 guy is Anderson Silva.
Ooh,
he only made number 4.
That low, eh?
But I'll tell you why as we go through the list. But like he is specifically like the way he inspired everybody. Like I guarantee you're hard pressed to find a current UFC fighter who wasn't in some way inspired by Silva.
Yeah.
The way he went between 185 and 205, and he was named the Spider because he was like Spider-Man. Yeah. Where he would start every fight in that.
I think
Spider-Man position.
that was like some of the coolest stuff, right? When he actually went up to 205, that's when he had almost like his best performances, right?
He maybe should have stayed there. But
against Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner, and then James the Sandman Irvin too. He went up to 205.
Yep.
Destroyed all 3 of those guys.
Destroyed those guys for sure. Because he would like dodge all their punches, and that's why he got famous. Like he was like the Muhammad Ali of MMA because like you couldn't touch the guy.
Yeah.
And he was a bit old than some of these guys, but he'd make fun of them. He'd mess around. Obviously, it ended up being his downfall when he fought Weidman. But like he spent I think 2,400 something days as champion.
Yeah.
Which is like a span of like 8 years.
So what do you think the issue was when he ran into Weidman the first time? Do you think that he just stuck around too long? Do you think Weidman was just that good? What do you think that?
I think he could have won for sure. I think the only thing
he was fooling around too much.
I think he was fooling around too much. The only thing Weidman brought to that fight that other people didn't bring, pardon my language, was a set of balls.
Yeah.
Most fighters were like threw punches at Anderson Silva but didn't put their weight into it. They didn't go forward because in reality, Silva is some of his best dodges. He's just leaning back. He's very off balance, but no one came forward. What did Weidman do?
They didn't follow up, right? His opponents never followed up.
What did Weidman do? He took a small step forward, landed that left hook to the jaw, and put Silva down. Yep. So like I think if Silva maybe his head got a little too big, maybe not.
And then the second fight, he came in and he didn't look himself, right? He looked timid. He looked like he was almost carrying in the baggage of getting knocked out the first time by Weidman, right?
Probably, yeah. And then unfortunately he broke his leg, and no one was the same after that one.
And then the rest is history, right? And then he ends his career by losing to Uriah Hall with his glass jaw,
which is one of his most famous knockouts too. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can watch our previous video on the breakdown between Hall and Silva, which happened this past weekend. That's my number 4 guy. Again, he's been a super inspiration to almost everybody.
So
his striking was phenomenal.
I might as well tell you right now, since I have him on my list, he's at my number 3. I have him at number 3.
Okay, so who's number 4?
So number 4 for me I have Khabib Nurmagomedov.
And number 4.
Number 4.
I really thought he was going to be higher on your list than that.
Yeah, so let's get into this because a lot of people have been ranking him as like the number 1 greatest of all time fighter. Okay. I think, so I've actually heard John Jones, and John Jones is making his case for why Khabib should not be ranked over him. And I sort of listened to John Jones's argument, and he's got a great argument. So John Jones's argument is John Jones, the former light heavyweight champion, because he gave up his title, but he has the most title wins in UFC history.
Okay,
right?
That's fair.
Khabib has only fought for the title. He won the title from Al Iaquinta. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then he only made 3 title defenses. So that's, I mean, when you're comparing, like, I get, okay, so I want to say as well, he's still on my list. Khabib's on my list, mm-hmm. right? I think that's even good enough to be on the list. He did retire, 29-0. He might come back for one more fight. We'll see. But I think that final 3-fight streak of beating Conor, beating Dustin Poirier, and beating Justin Gaethje, I think that's one of the best 3-fight streaks in UFC history. Mm-hmm. So that alone puts him on my list, and being 29-0. But is a 3-fight streak, like, does that weigh more than a career of longevity? I think John Jones has had more longevity. I don't think that you can attribute more to such a small amount of wins than you can for being dominant over a long period of time. Because if Khabib comes back, and who's to say that he couldn't, and makes maybe 5 or 6 more title defenses, okay, then we have a different discussion, right? Because then we have dominance over a long period of time. But Khabib just hasn't fought enough top guys. That's my issue.
I think like the way that the UFC ranks their guys in top 10 is basically on their record and their fighting style, and which makes sense. I think that's the way you're ranking them too, which makes a lot of sense. And their record. Mm-hmm. I'm ranking the minor guys, like we said, a little bit differently. But I agree. John Jones had a longer record, and he beat some of the best guys. Mm-hmm. There's some what's the word we're looking for? There's some discrepancies in John Jones's timing. Just like now, he has a great record. He has a great highlight reel. Phenomenal fighter. In his prime, was a lot more marketable than he is now due to like these blemishes complications on his record. Mm-hmm. But I agree. If Khabib came back and like went on a tear, which I believe he could, he's retiring for family reasons. Then but I think that's you have to consider that, right? I think. Yes, like right now, do I think that Khabib is the pound for pound best right now? I think that he is pound for pound the best right now. He's the most dominant guy at his weight class right now. Oh, yeah. But he has to do that more. We have to see more of him for me to put him as my number 1 greatest of all time. Fair enough. I think he's even be
on the list. He actually surpassed Demetrius Johnson, who has the most consecutive title defenses in a row. I'm putting him higher than Demetrius Johnson, which shows like I'm just putting 3 guys above him. Yeah. So that's still like a great amount of respect.
He has the potential to be like number 1 on both of our lists for sure. Yeah. If he had fought more, unfortunately. Yeah. So that was your number 4. Okay, yep. So we'll go to my number 3. Number 3 is actually Conor McGregor.
Ooh, okay.
But, again,
I was considering Conor McGregor, but I like to hear why you put him on the list.
Well, I put him on the list because obviously I dare you to find someone in the UFC mixed martial arts sport who's more famous than Conor McGregor in today's day and age.
No doubt about it.
Right? And again,
ever.
and exactly.
He's the most famous, like, is he the most famous combat sports athlete of all time? That might be a different discussion. But
yeah, I mean, you got to take into account Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson for that one as well. And Sugar Ray Robinson
and Floyd Mayweather.
Exactly.
But he's definitely the most famous UFC athlete of all time.
Absolutely no doubt about that, and which is why he made number 3 on my list. Not to top it off, he's a phenomenal fighter. He backs up his stuff because his career wouldn't have gone that way if he talked all that stuff and then lost.
Yeah.
And in terms of like fighters who got paid, like he could be number 1 on this list 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes to show you, like, people who don't watch UFC know exactly who Conor is because of all of, like, the hype that he built around himself, the way he dressed, the way he carried himself, and the way he was, like, still sometimes humble in both victory and defeat even after all that. He built an amazing fan base for himself, and honestly got himself more pay than anyone in the UFC ever has to this day.
For sure.
And like I said, exactly, I would put him on the level of, like, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali in terms of, like, fame, because there are kids nowadays who have been alive, like, not as long as he's even been fighting, who know who he is. There are kids who are, like, 5 years old who know who Muhammad Ali is, right? Like, that's the kind of fame he's built for himself.
It's a fame that transcends his time, right?
Absolutely. And on top of that, he dethroned Aldo after 10 years of being undefeated.
That's a huge win.
He avenged the losses that he got, except for Khabib, obviously, which is why Khabib's on my list as well. I won't tell you where, but not yet, at least, right? Like, the
suspense is killing me.
He literally took Floyd Mayweather out of retirement because of all the hype he built around himself, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And transited a new sport, right? And again, to add to my previous point, got freaking paid.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, if this list was about fighters who got paid, Conor McGregor would be on the top of both of our lists without a doubt.
Yeah.
And, like, hard pressed you to find anybody in our friend group who doesn't watch UFC like we do, but they know who Conor McGregor is.
Everybody does.
Everyone knows.
Everybody does.
Yeah. And I think he did a lot for the sport in that sense as well, because I was like, oh, who is this guy? And then maybe he made people fans of the UFC who weren't fans of the UFC before.
Yeah. So I didn't put him on my list, and it's obvious why, right? We're clearly, like, establishing this list based off of different criteria, which I think is good, because it gives you two different opinions on how you could make a greatest of all time list, right?
Absolutely.
If we're talking about maybe like a Mount Rushmore, like maybe somebody who's changed the MMA game in a substantial way, I think that Conor McGregor could be one of those guys. He changed the face of the UFC, right?
That's how I, like, made my list, right? People who have had, like, an impact on the sport, and that impact translated to other things. But I also like yours because you actually have a better, like, analysis of, like, their records and all stuff. You did more research on that too, so I like your list a lot, actually.
Yeah. So if we're getting back to my list, I've already mentioned Anderson Silva made my number 3 spot, so I guess we can move on to number 2.
Yep.
What do you got?
And obviously, like, Anderson Silva for...
I think I can predict where this is going for your top 2.
Obviously, there's a reason why he picked Silva as number 3, just because basically the same reason I put him at number 4. Like, his record was phenomenal. Still, like, the most consecutive days as champion. Probably the only guy to go too long and lose his last fight, but, like, the internet didn't bash him. All things on Instagram these days, how great he was. Like, inspiration to both of us for sure.
He stuck around too long.
He did, and he went the way of Muhammad Ali. Hopefully he doesn't end up with Parkinson's, but I think science has come a little bit further than Muhammad Ali's time. But my number 2 is actually Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Okay.
And it does
that coming.
It does have to do with his undefeated record, because no one else on my list has that. It's very hard to keep that, especially at 29-0, and 13 of those fights were in the UFC, which means he fought the best, like, some of the guys who were very high level in the lightweight division, which, for the guys who don't know, is the most saturated division. It has the most fighters at 155. And like you said, those last 3 fights were against very high level guys, Conor included, guys that all thought, oh, if they do this, they can beat Khabib, right? But what did Khabib end up doing? First of all, he was a quiet guy, didn't hype himself up much, didn't have to, because he had that star power that made, again, like Conor, he, like, in a different way, made everyone who wasn't a fan of the UFC know who he was and still want to watch him fight, even though they don't watch UFC regularly. And on top of that, also, I just like what he was capable of doing, in the sense that he not only took away your game plan and all things you were good at, but as he's beating the crap out of you, he's like, man, you should really give up.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't happen.
I would have liked to see him fight Tony Ferguson.
I would have loved to see him fight Tony Ferguson, and I think if he
that's one of the wins that I think would like shoot him up a little bit higher on my scale. He just didn't beat all of even his contemporaries. Like, he didn't even stick around for a whole, like, generation of fighters.
Yeah.
Let alone multiple, like the 2 guys on the top of my list, these guys fought multiple generations of fighters. Khabib, you really only saw him fight like one generation.
Yeah, and that was his generation.
Yeah. And he didn't even clear them all out. He didn't get to Tony.
Unfortunately, with Khabib, he had struggles with weight cuts. He always made weight, but he also had trouble with like injuries a lot, maybe due to his training.
Well, there's also the issue of, I mean, he's a devout Muslim, right? So he was under the practice of like Ramadan at certain months of the year, right? So that took him out of the competition window, right? Like certain months of the year, you couldn't be in a fight camp. You can't be fighting during those months, right?
Absolutely, which is unfortunate for his career. But even with those time restrictions, he still got so famous. The opposite way of Conor. Like not talking any shit, being quiet and just going in there and kicking ass.
Did he get famous the opposite way of Conor though?
Well, no, the same way as like in the same that like he beat everybody. Like Conor also beat his guys, but like
but did he not only get famous because he beat Conor, and when he did beat Conor, he started doing the wild stuff like jumping out of the cage, doing the eagle on all of Conor's teammates?
I feel like he was famous before that though, because that fight was so hyped. He was undefeated, beating everybody. They used his fight against Michael Johnson where he was like head against the cage, punching in the face, saying you should give up. This is over. You know it. I know it.
Yeah.
I think that win put him up there, and therefore everyone wanted to see him fight Conor, right? So I think he was famous, maybe not as famous, but he was already well known outside of the UFC before fighting Conor.
I don't think that he was that well known. I think that the incident with you remember when Conor threw that dolly at the bus?
Yeah.
That made it like
probably should have put Conor down lower on my list for like getting on into his own head, but
yeah.
Like it definitely,
that was a worldwide like sensation. This guy went to go and like basically attack Khabib inside of a bus with a dolly, throws the dolly at the window.
Yeah, it hurts some people, like ends up like
shattering the glass of the bus.
Yeah, getting arrested, like the whole the ups and downs, but regardless, like Khabib, based on his record and his ability to rise to fame and take everybody, like basically just take down everyone's doubts.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, what if this guy does this?
He took away all my doubts. Like, after he beat Justin Gaethje, I was like, man, if this guy fights again, I'm not betting against him.
His ability to like oppose his will on everybody, and the fact that he like got that famous, that I had friends who had never watched the UFC just still asking me like, what do you think of Khabib? I'm like, you don't even watch UFC. How do you know who Khabib is? That was his level, and I think he also had that impact on the sport as well. Yeah. Especially from like how often you see a Muslim guy that high up, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
My number 2, and you did not put him on your list, John Bones Jones.
I have my issues with John Jones, but go ahead.
I want to know why you didn't put him on your list.
Obviously, honestly, he in his prime, like he was the youngest UFC champion ever. He became the champ at 23 years old, which is ridiculous. His reach is as long as Stefan Struve's, who is 6'11", and John Jones is 6'4", and he beat the previous generation: Lyoto, Vitor, Shogun Rua, like Rashad Evans. He beat them all. Rampage, thank you. He beat all of them in a very decisive fashion.
Then he beat the next generation. Gustafsson.
And he
Teixeira, Daniel Cormier,
Santos. He still
beat Santos, and he beat
Dominic
Reyes.
So 100%,
was even like more controversial, maybe.
But he beat Gustafsson twice actually. Yeah. So absolutely, I agree that he has done, and your previous arguments about why Khabib shouldn't be higher than him stands true. Like, he won the title, kept it for a very, 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 very long time in a decisive manner. Is just that, like,
basically never lost.
Yeah, never lost. I think the one loss on his record was actually like a no contest, a DQ because like some illegal kicking.
He did the 12-6 elbow on Mark Hamill or Matt Hamill. Matt Hamill? I think Mark Hamill was Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill was Skywalker. So like that, like, so technically he's never been beaten, only by like the rules and a mistake he made. But then he continued to lose against the law, unfortunately. So his record against the law is very unfortunate.
Yeah, see, I didn't factor that in, right? Okay, John Jones is a complete and utter screw up. Like, the guy has botched every opportunity he's been given, right? Like, the guy, when he starts off his career, he's like known as like I think he's like a pastor's son too. I think his dad's like a pastor or a
maybe
priest.
I don't remember that.
So he's like known as being like this humble guy, like this nice guy.
And honestly, he was.
And then it goes straight to his head as soon as he beats Shogun Rua and becomes champion, right?
Yeah.
Then he starts crashing Lamborghinis while drunk driving.
Or anything was something.
Then he starts hitting a pregnant woman's car while he was intoxicated, then coming back to the scene, opening up his car trunk and taking money out of the trunk.
Yeah.
Right? Then he pops for and I'm talking about all the stuff that's wrong about him. Then he goes and pops for steroids against Daniel Cormier. Then he pops for steroids again, and then he has like another incident where he like pulses for steroids.
Yeah.
Like the guy's a complete like screw up, right? But
as a fighter, I agree. Like he is absolutely one of the greatest. He's
basically undefeated, and he's fighting in the light heavyweight division. Light heavyweight division, the guys have more power, so I think it's riskier to fight at a higher weight because you have a greater chance of getting knocked out.
Absolutely.
Right?
See,
the only issue that I have, and I dock him for this, he could have been maybe number one for me, is you can't be getting busted for steroids.
Yeah, busted for steroids and other drugs. Like, so everyone else on my list.
You could honestly make a list without him on it, but then you'd also have to take Anderson Silva off of it because he popped for steroids too.
Yeah, but not as frequently.
Not as frequently, but
yeah,
one time is really all that matters, right?
I just feel like, and yes, at the one point, John Jones could definitely have changed like the sport, and he could have had a huge impact. But I feel like based on my criteria, people who will have like a longer lasting legacy, I feel like with all these blemishes on John Jones' like legal record, I feel like his name's kind of been taken out of that because he took himself out of it before he experienced like his legacy he could cement, right? Like,
yeah,
it wasn't old age, it wasn't injuries, it was his own misbehavior.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I didn't make my list is because like of all those reasons, absolutely, I think we're
talking about all-time greatest fighters though.
Yeah, he could probably almost undoubtedly beat everyone on my list if they were all the same size and in their primes. He could probably win against everybody, even Khabib, because he like.
That's when it gets like a gray area for me. Like if you can't just assume that they're all the same size because you might not have the same skill level. Like you won't be able to do the same things physically at different sizes.
Yeah, but that's what pound for pound rankings are, right? It's like
if these guys they're all made up lists.
Yeah, if these guys were the same size, this guy would still win based on how good he is.
Yeah,
proportion wise and all that stuff. So yes, I agree. John Jones could probably beat everyone on my list, but the fact that my criteria is based on their impact in and out of the UFC, I didn't put him on my list because of like all his blemishes outside and how he like really like if you look at his legacy right now, it's gonna be like he was great until he got into drugs.
Yeah.
So that's why he's not on my list.
So it sounds like we're going the same direction for our number one greatest of all time.
I mean, we might as well say it at the same time because.
And number one.
Mine is Georges St-Pierre.
Georges St-Pierre. GSP.
So I think
Are we biased because we're Canadian, Robbie?
Well, that's probably one of the reasons for me because he's honestly one of my absolute heroes. He changed the face of Canadian combat sports. But there's other reasons to it too as well because he only has 2 losses to Matt Hughes and Matt Serra.
Which he avenged.
When he was young, and he avenged them. He beat Matt Hughes twice actually. He finished both of those guys. And yes, you could make the argument that later in his career he wasn't as exciting, but his mentality was always the same. Like, I will do what I have to do to win these fights, and he
stuck around for a long time. He fought like he fought like 3 generations of fighters.
Multiple generations. He basically took everyone out of their comfort zone, beat them in striking, beat them in wrestling, whatever. And again, very similar to Khabib, but almost a higher level. He got that level of fame without doing what Conor did. He was the nice Canadian guy. He was a Canadian stereotype and used that as his marketing tool to be so famous, and again got known outside of the sport. Like my high school graduation, prom, like they do, like people vote for who's going to be this person, like who's in this, one of the categories is who's the next GSP. Like he's his own thing. Like at this point, if you're a Canadian fighter making it big, you're the next GSP hopeful, right? Like he's the mold. You're trying to be like him.
I second everything that you're saying here. Like GSP was the guy, right? he's like almost like the golden boy, right?
Yeah, nothing wrong happened, and everyone suspected he was on steroids.
No steroids.
If he was, he never got caught. But I don't think
nobody
he ever
really
was.
suspected it. I think everybody thought, man, this guy's clean. Like he's the cleanest athlete.
I thought he was clean, but I've had people talk to me like, "There's no way he's clean." Like, they're all crazy.
But everybody in the know, like they knew that GSP, he wouldn't do something like that.
Yeah, he's sort of
like that's the thing. Like everyone like read into his mindset too. They're like, no, there's no way GSP would do that. He's like mentally, he would never do that.
Yeah,
he wouldn't cheat.
He's the one guy who like admits that he's scared before fights. No one else does that, but like he used that as his motivation. Not only did he like retire on top at welterweight, years later he comes back. At middleweight, 15 pounds higher against Bisping, who was like
the champion.
He was good, and he won again.
Yeah,
and he still won.
2 weight classes.
So 2 division champion after years of being off, comes back, and now everyone wants him to fight Khabib or whatever. But
let me ask you this: if John Jones comes back to heavyweight and he beats whoever the champion is at the time, either Francis Ngannou or Stipe Miocic, do you put John Jones on your list?
Still no, just because I don't suspect that. Like,
what does John Jones have to do to even be on your list? Is there a way for him to get on your list?
He needs to go back in time and stop doing all the crimes he committed.
Yeah,
and clean up his legacy. Because like,
oh, you mean like throwing a dolly into a bus and hurting everyone, or punching an old man in a bar?
Fair enough. Conor did his share of bad things too, but I think his fame still surpassed that. He made up for those.
Okay,
because you still.
Yeah,
maybe. And
for those of you who didn't hear that, doesn't matter if you're a criminal so long as you're famous, right?
But in that respect, though, like
that's why they call him the notorious one.
Exactly. But Conor's still in the media. You still hear about him a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he did a lot of bad things. He paid his dues. Maybe he still has things to learn being that famous. But you're still hearing a lot about him in like mainstream contention. When's the last time you heard about John Jones aside from like contending Khabib's thing? Like, he hasn't been making that many waves.
Yeah,
in my opinion, which is why he's on my list. I guess if I had to be nice to John Jones,
in terms of the popular waves, okay.
Yeah, if I'm being nice to John Jones, he would have to come back and win for a good couple years, being constantly clean,
okay,
and staying out of prison, which maybe he could do, but I don't know. He vacated his own title.
He's still pretty young, John Jones.
I know
he's like 36, maybe 30, maybe younger.
I think earlier 30s than that, because he won. He feels like he's older because he won the championship at such a young age, at 23 years old.
Yeah.
Which again, very impressive. Still holds that record. I think if he comes back and really focuses and says a couple years out of jail and maybe bringing his kids back into his life, because like when I first watched him, he had some kids and he was being a good father on the UFC bed. You don't see that anymore. I think obviously all these things, maybe his wife left him. I wouldn't blame her. Right? Like if he fixes his life up, maybe he's earned. Like not that my respect.
There you go, John Jones. If you're listening, you know what to do now.
Not that my respect.
You just have to come back. Fight for another couple of years, win all your fights. Let's see, you got to take the heavyweight championship belt.
The light heavyweight championship belt back again.
Donate all your money to charity.
It just bugs me.
Come give Robbie some back massages.
And money. give me your money too.
That'll do it, eh?
Yeah,
John Jones just has to bribe you.
Yeah, if I get $500,000, she's right at the top of my list, 100%.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way. Now, not that my respect means anything to someone like John Jones, but that's my list.
Yeah,
that's my list.
That's fair, and that's both of our lists, right? We counted down our personal top 5 greatest of all time UFC fighters.
GSP for the win, baby.
GSP for the win. Let's get to one more segment, just because we're running long on time. Okay. I want to start a new segment.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to actually end today with this segment we're calling Place Your Bets.
We're not ending with it. We're still going to do our last segment, but this is like the middle thing.
Okay. So we want to do, yeah. Okay, so we're going to do Place Your Bets. We're calling it Place Your Bets because we're going to have a topic. And in this topic, you're going to either pick A or B. Okay, so for the first Place Your Bets, it's very relevant for what we're talking about today. We are talking about Georges St. Pierre or Anderson Silva in their primes.
Yes.
Okay, Georges St. Pierre versus Anderson Silva. Who do you pick? Okay, so first we have to start off by saying, what weight class are they weighing in at?
Well, I would say probably like 185 because they both fought there.
Oh, we want to say, okay, we want to go middleweight. Okay. But Georges St-Pierre, he wasn't in his prime when he was fighting at 185.
That's true, but he probably could have been.
Okay. So we want to say 185. I was thinking maybe like meet in the middle between 170 and 185.
There's maybe like that'd be like 170. That'd be like 177, give or take.
Yeah.
177.
I'm saying a catch weight in the middle just to make it even, right?
Okay, fair enough. Yep, sure.
Okay. So let's go catch weight right down the middle, in between welterweight and middleweight. Georges St-Pierre versus Anderson Silva. Place your bets, Robbie. Who you got?
Well, I mean, based on my list, this is maybe biased, but I also do think that GSP would pull it out.
Okay.
Now, striking, I give it to Silva, but the reason GSP was so good was because he nullified what his opponent was good at.
Okay.
I do believe, and we've seen Silva struggle with wrestling. Well, especially against Chael Sonnen.
Against Chael, juiced up Chael Sonnen.
He still won.
When Anderson had a injured rib too.
Yep, he still won, which is great. That's why he's like on my list as well. But I think a really good GSP, whose striking is still really good striker. Yes, he's a bit shorter, but he's really good at like dodging kicks and taking his opponents down and keeping them there. And now Silva's dangerous off his back, but GSP is dangerous on top of anybody.
Okay.
His ground and pound was too good.
Yeah.
I think he would have been able to pull out the win, probably by decision.
Yeah, I wouldn't see GSP finishing Silva. Not in the prime.
Not in their prime. Maybe now.
Now, well, I mean, GSP's out of his prime too, right?
Yeah.
But maybe now with Silva having such a glass jaw.
Yeah. Maybe by submission though. I can see GSP winning by submission.
I gotta pick option B here. I gotta go Anderson Silva. It seems like all of our picks, we keep choosing the opposite guy. And I promise you guys, we're not doing this just for some sort of like special effect. Like we're actually like picking opposite people, right? Well, we both picked Thiago Santos
for this weekend for sure.
Yeah.
But if you look at our builds, actually, I'm not built like no one's built like GSP, but like in terms of like he's taller than he's taller than me.
That's what you're saying.
Jackson's taller than me. He's built like Silva. He's got those long arms. I'm a bit shorter than he is. I'm taller than GSP, but and proportionately, like that would be like that'd be the fight between like the two of us would be GSP versus Silva. They're a lot better than us, but obviously.
So yeah, I want to get into. So I'm picking Silva. I think there's a couple factors there. So number one, the size. The size is obviously going to have a factor. Silva was very strong at his weight class of 185. Like he was a strong guy. He didn't have the best takedown defense, but I think that the length that Silva would have over GSP would cause issues for George to get into range and actually engage in the clinch or maybe shoot for a double leg takedown. I think, and come on, we have to like go back to the prime. Like again, I think there's this sort of like recency bias where we look at Silva now and we're like, okay, Silva's like kind of trash right now. But Silva in his prime, man, just the psychological, like, I think that's part of the reason why the fight never happened. George could have went up to 185. He could have went up to 185. He didn't want to. In a recent interview, Dana White was actually asked about that fight, the Silva versus GSP fight, why it never happened. Dana quite clearly said GSP didn't want to go up to 185. He also mentioned that Silva didn't want to go up to 205 and fight John Jones. They all had the opportunity. They could have done it. The problem was they probably didn't think that they were going to win.
Or maybe even the money wasn't right.
Maybe the money wasn't right too. Like I don't know what the factors were, but I do think that Silva in his prime, he had this psychological effect on everybody, right? GSP is well known. We talked about this, how he's sort of like he's talked about how he's experienced fear before going into the cage. You don't think he'd have that elevated level of fear going against Anderson Silva?
But the fear, in his prime? But he explained that the fear made him perform his best. So maybe that more fear would have made him do even better.
Maybe,
especially like prime GSP.
Silva in his prime, he was dropping everybody.
Exactly.
He would take out everybody.
You're right. So maybe even he would win the first time, but then I think GSP will come back and win the second time, which is what he did against Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, because he experienced like a mental shift too. This first time he fought Matt Hughes, he was like looking up in the stare down. He was scared to look. He had so much respect for Matt Hughes. He couldn't look him in the eye.
Yeah.
Second time he came back, looked him right in the eye, and finished him with a head kick and punches.
Yeah, but Matt Hughes, we're comparing Matt Hughes to Anderson Silva.
Absolutely, it's not even
in his prime.
It's not even the same fighter. But also GSP in his prime was a lot more aggressive in his striking too. and
Sure.
and his takedowns.
Sure.
So especially, I think
We could even say that the second time he fought Matt Hughes wasn't even Matt Hughes' prime, though.
arguably yes. The second time, yeah, like the second time that she shouldn't have been like. Well, actually, second time he was still good. The third time he fought Matt Hughes and won by an armbar, that definitely was Matt Hughes out of his prime.
Yeah.
And then he beat up Matt Serra to avenge his second loss.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, though, guys.
Yeah.
So that's our opening. The first time we've done Place Your Bets. We'd like to hear from you guys. Who do you think would win?
Yeah.
George St. Pierre or Anderson Silva in their primes?
So we still want to hear if you agree with our list of top 5, maybe even your top 5 you guys at the time, and who you think would win between the prime Silva versus prime GSP.
Yeah.
And now, guys, we're going to close this off with our favorite segment that we've done since day one. What are you fighting for? Jackson, since I'm talking, do you want to start off with what are you fighting for this month?
It over to me. I do not have one prepared, but
Neither do I, actually.
You know what? I'm just going to go with not necessarily something that I'm fighting for. I'm just going to go with a basic principle that I'm fighting for, that I like to stand for. And this would be loyalty. Loyalty is a key principle that I think that everyone should keep in mind, that they should maybe live their life with. I think that forgetting people that helped you out in the past, that's obviously a big no-no. I think that staying true to your friends is your friends, your family, right? Like, loyalty is just generally a good principle to live by. Do you have any thoughts about, like?
I 100% agree with you. Loyalty is absolutely huge. And going to say you got famous, you got to remember who was with you before you were there, right? Like,
remember the people that brought you to the dance, right?
100%. 100%. I think loyalty is something that
because then you just start living in your own head, and you start developing like a massive ego, just thinking like, oh, I don't need them. But what kind of life is that, right?
Yeah, I think you should always stick with your day ones, unless your day ones are dragging you down.
Yes, absolutely.
But loyalty is 100%. Like, don't abandon anybody just because your head's getting too big.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you got one. What are you fighting for?
Yeah,
this week?
I got one. Honestly, it's kind of a different reason. It's something I heard over this weekend that it came up. I'm gonna fight for just having a decent time this month of November.
Okay.
Just because I realized, like, from what others said, there's actually no long weekends or no like holidays or events coming up in November. Like, obviously no events because of COVID, but like in general, like
Remembrance Day is coming up.
Yeah, is that really a holiday though?
No.
Like, it's nothing to celebrate. Yeah,
it's my mom's birthday.
Oh well, happy birthday, Maureen, 100%. But yeah, like I think everyone I talk to, like after Halloween, what do they do? They wait for Christmas, and there's a whole like 2 months away.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you can find something that could make your November enjoyable without having a holiday or a long weekend as like the base for it, I think that's a great way to keep your mental well-being up, especially as it gets colder, it gets dark earlier. It just happened now. Daylight savings time just happened. So if you can find a way to keep yourself in a positive attitude without looking forward to Christmas, I think that's something to fight for.
Yeah, absolutely. That was I think we had some good ones. Some last minute. What were you fighting for?
Some last minute things to fight for sure.
Yeah.
Normally we come up with these like an hour or so or a day in advance. They were just like, oh shit, I forgot. So honestly, for impromptu crap, not bad.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Anyways, guys, it's been quite a slice today. It was a little bit of a longer podcast today, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you have any thoughts about those things that we talked about, right? Like the top 5 greatest UFC fighters of all time, let us know. Let us know as well. Place your bets, guys. Place your bets. Anderson Silva, GSP in their prime.
Because we want to bring this up in a future podcast, like what the votes were, right? So if no one votes, it'd be really awkward and upsetting if we have no votes or comments. So or else we'll just basically have to make it up, and that'll be just depressing. Yeah,
and if you have any ideas of what you'd like us to talk about in the future, any ideas for future maybe challenges or questions you'd like us to cover, feel free to leave a comment, shoot us a DM at 2FriendsFighting. And I think that's just about it, Robbie?
Just don't forget to like the video, comment, subscribe. We are also on Spotify, so if listening on Spotify, please give the podcast a follow. Download the episode.
They really help out, guys. The likes and subscribes definitely help out.
And the downloads on the episodes on Spotify as well definitely goes to show. So please, guys, if you don't mind doing that, listen to us in your car right to work or
We're
back
doing
to
this
home.
for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you. And again, I think that's it for me today. You can find us on Instagram at 2FriendsFighting with the number 2. I'm at Robbie Moss Fitness, and Jackson's at Jackson Corey. At this point, you can probably
the links will
figure
be
out
in the video.
Yeah, you can figure out how to spell it at this point. Thanks for listening, guys. Jackson, you have anything else to say?
That's it. Hasta la vista, everybody. This is 2 Friends Fighting.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Of course, that is a handsome, pretty sentence. So there was this decline right there. It's like, oh, that's the same thing. I'm handsome, I'm pretty, I'm attractive, beautiful.